Yeah. Yeah.
I am done being nice. Now, before you turn the radio off or start praying for me, let me explain. I'm not done being loving. I'm not done being generous. I'm not done being thoughtful. I'm not done being warm. I'm not done caring about people. The kind of nice that says yes while exhausted, the kind of nice that avoids truth and calls it peace, the kind of nice that apologizes for having needs, the kind of nice that abandons itself to keep everyone else comfortable. That kind of nice, I am done. Because nice and kind are not the same thing. Nice often protects comfort. Kind protects dignity. Nice says, I don't want this to feel awkward. Kind says, I care enough to be honest. Nice says, I'm fine. Kind says, it matters and I matter too. Nice says, I don't want to ruffle any feathers. Kind says, sometimes love has to ruffle some feathers. And don't be afraid to ruffle some feathers. Just make sure you're not doing it to be cruel. Do it because truth, respect, and care sometimes need a little wind under their wings. So today's episode is called I'm Done Being Nice. And the truth is, kindness has a deeper backbone. Welcome to Human Being with Dr. Susan. I am Susan Hendrick, your host, and this is the place where we talk about being human. The beautiful parts, the messy parts, the holy parts, the parts we're still trying to understand, and the parts we're learning to carry with a little more grace. Today, we're talking about the difference between being nice and being kind. And I want to be clear right from the start. I'm not here to start a war on nice people. The world doesn't need fewer pleasant people. Nice can be lovely. Nice can be warm. Nice can make a room feel softer. Nice can be manners and thoughtfulness, friendliness, hospitality, politeness, and social grace. But there's a version of nice that is not really kindness. We're going deep today. This version is fear. It's fawning. It's approval seeking. It's silence dressed up as peace. It's self-abandonment wearing a smile. And that is where nice starts to cost us. Before we go any further, I want to share a special announcement. Next Sunday, July 12th, my imperfect Better After Broken co-host, Jeff Cervello, is bringing an incredible guest to our show, Dr. Rachel Goldman. You might have seen Dr. Rachel on Oprah. You might have heard Dr. Rachel on the Mel Robbins podcast. And now, thanks to Jeff, she's joining us at the Imperfect table. And I love this because it says so much about Jeff and his heart, his reach, his curiosity, and his commitment to bringing meaningful conversation to our listeners. Dr. Goldman has a new book, When Life Happens, the mindset shift you need to manage stress, build confidence, and break free. She's talked about this with Mel Robbins, and now she's going to come and talk to us about it. So I love this because on Imperfect, Jeff and I talk about what it means to become better after broken, not polished, not perfect, not pretending, just honest and still becoming. So that has a lot to do with what we're going to talk about today when it comes to being nice versus being kind. So mark your calendar for Sunday, July 12th at 6 p.m. Eastern, where we'll have Dr. Rachel Goldman on Imperfect, Better After Broken. So much healing begins when we stop performing and start telling the truth. Nice versus kind. This is a big topic for me in particular. It represents a big change that I've made in my life, and I have a couple really difficult stories to share with you that I'm doing so because I hope it might help you take a look at where you might be abandoning self. So let's start with definitions. Nice means agreeable, pleasant, socially easy, and often focused on making others comfortable. Kind means caring, generous, benevolent, and committed to the good of another person. That last part matters because kindness is not just about tone, it's about intention. Kindness asks, what is loving here? Not what will make me liked, not what will keep this person from being upset, not how do I get out of this without conflict. Kindness asks what helps. And sometimes what helps is gentle, but sometimes what helps is encouragement, a meal, a ride, a listening ear, a handwritten note, or a soft place to land. Sometimes what helps is a hard conversation, a boundary, a no, a truth spoken with care, a standard held, an accountability moment, a mirror. Nice tries to be painless. Kind tries to be healing. You see the difference? Healing is not always painless. That's something I didn't really understand until just a few years ago, and I've been around a long time. So I'm going to tell you a personal story, and I call this story Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. I learned this the hard way. I was working at the job I later would retire from, but this was way early in my tenure with AstraZeneca. And I was office roommates next door with a good friend. And she had a book on her shelf when I went in to have a chat with her. And the book said, Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office by Dr. Lois P. Frankel. And I remember picking up that book because I just thought the title was intriguing. And it was ironic because I had a corner office in that moment. So I'm like, I wonder what this is about. So I remember turning the book over and reading the back jacket. And there was a series of 10 questions on the back jacket, questions about behaviors that you might display. So always greeting people first, having a candy dish on the corner of your desk, always having your door open, making sure that you accommodate people to surprise them with your availability. And I remember reading these behaviors and thinking, yes, 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 that's me. That's good, right? I thought I was passing this test. I thought I'm considerate, I'm helpful, I'm flexible, I'm collaborative, I'm easy to work with. And then I read to the bottom. The book was written for someone like me. Not because being thoughtful is bad, not because being warm is bad, not being generous as a bad thing, but because I had confused being good with being endlessly agreeable. I confused being respected with being liked. I had confused being kind with being convenient. And that realization was uncomfortable. I almost felt tricked. I just laughed out loud. Here's this book about how you're not going to do well in life. And she defines what her meaning of well is like, unless you are able to focus on yourself first. And that went against what I was raised to believe. I still believe this, that looking out for others is a high form of contributing to the world. But it's one thing to realize you have a weakness. It's another thing to realize that what you thought was your virtue might also be your hiding place. Dr. Frankel's work names patterns that many women learn early and carry into adulthood. And it's not just women who experience this. Over apologizing, minimizing, rescuing, asking permission, softening authority, and staying likable at the expense of being clear. Men can do this too. Leaders can do this. Parents can do this. Friends can do this. People of faith can do this. Coaches, caregivers can do this. Anyone who learned that love must be earned through usefulness can do this. I remember being over a friend's house when I was a kid, and her father was not a very kind person. I was always kind of intimidated by him when I was over at the house. And I would hear him say this phrase so often when he wanted to get the kids out of his realm, out of his way. He would say, "Go make yourself useful to my friend." And I just remember that not sitting well with me, because I realize now that she was learning that being useful or being easy to deal with kept her safe. And I could relate to this. The cost of being too nice. Let's name some of those costs. You say yes when you mean no. You agree in the meeting, then disagree in the hallway. You soften the message until nobody knows what you actually mean. You avoid giving feedback and call it compassion. You carry resentment and call it patience. You do the work for everyone and call it being a team player. Recognize any of this? You accept disrespect and call it grace. You over-explain your boundaries because you feel guilty for having them. And you apologize for things that are not your own. You become very good at reading the room and very bad at hearing yourself. That is not kindness. That is depletion. That's performance. And the most important thing to me to say to you today is all of these things are based in fear. And in some cases, it's what we call fawning. Fawning over someone to keep them from getting angry, from abandoning you, from not seeing you as useful or relevant. So fawning, when nice, is a survival strategy. Many people know the threat responses: fight, flight, and freeze. Fight says, I will confront the threat. Flight says, I will escape the threat. Freeze says, I will go still until the threat passes. Fawn says, I will please the threat. And fawning is often described in trauma work as a survival response, a way of becoming agreeable, pleasing, useful, non-threatening in order to stay safe. And that matters because sometimes what looks like niceness is really nervous system strategy. And it's not always conscious. It's not always manipulation. It's not always weakness. Sometimes it's a learned survival pattern where a child learns, if I stay sweet, I stay safe. If I don't need too much, I will not be rejected. If I make everyone else okay, maybe I will be okay. If I can sense the mood before it becomes dangerous, I can prevent the explosion. You can guess why we learn these things. But then that child grows up and becomes the person who overfunctions at work, the person who cannot tolerate someone being disappointed, the person who checks the text message 3 times to make sure the tone is okay, the person who says, no worries, when there are, in fact, worries, the person who says, whatever works for you, when nothing about it works for them, the person who would rather be exhausted than disliked. That is fawning. And I want to say this carefully on this 4th of July weekend. I'm not talking about a character flaw. Fawning is not a character flaw. It's often a protective pattern. But once protected, might now be limiting you. And what once helped you stay safe might now be keeping you small. That's not freedom. That's not independence. That's actually a self-constructed trap. And the work isn't to become harsh. The work is to become whole. You don't have to trade warmth for strength. You don't have to become cold to stop being over accommodating. You don't have to become mean to stop being manipulated. I've lived a lot of my time feeling frightened to stand up because it feels black or white. You're either kind, over accommodating, or you become mean, dismissive, and rude. Mm-mm. You can keep your tenderness. You can keep your generosity. You can keep your softness, but you also need your spine. Kindness has a backbone. And self-abandonment is not love. So there's a line I want to sit with for a moment. Here it is. Somewhere along the way, I learned to make room for everyone else's feelings before my own. That is the quiet ache underneath so much excessive niceness. It's not that we love people too deeply, it's that we abandon ourselves too quickly. We quiet our hurt the moment someone else needs something. We treat our own heart like it's the first thing on the altar. And then we wonder why we're exhausted, not from loving, from disappearing. That distinction matters. Love doesn't require you to vanish. Kindness doesn't require you to be endlessly available. And compassion doesn't require you to betray your own nervous system. You can care deeply and still tell the truth. You can be generous and still have limits. You can be warm and still be clear. And here's the big one. You can be loving and still ruffle some feathers. In fact, sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop making yourself smaller so that everyone else can stay comfortable. Stop translating yourself for everyone. We spend so much of our lives translating ourselves, trying to make sure people understand our intent, trying to manage how we're perceived, trying to prove that we meant well. I've even done this when I'm driving and I accidentally drift a lane. I'll spend the next like 8 or 9 seconds trying to prove that I'm a good driver. I'm an excellent driver, never had an accident. And yet when I somehow make a rare mistake, I'm focused in my rearview mirror on making sure the person behind me isn't upset. Trying to soften the rough edges of our own truth so nobody walks away thinking we're selfish, difficult, dramatic, cold, ungrateful, or unkind. And that is I get tired just thinking about that. At some point, being too nice becomes a full-time public relations job for your personality. And you're not just living your life, you're explaining it, defending it, packaging it, and softening it. Always translating yourself into language that other people will approve of. My dad will say that one thing he would love for me to shed is people pleasing. And he's right. I'm working on that. Kindness doesn't require self-translation. Kindness, on the other hand, unlike niceness, kindness can say, I hope you understand me, but I don't need to manage your entire interpretation of me. That is freedom, 4th of Julyers. Because one of the signs that we're moving from nice to kind is this: we stop over explaining. You've heard this before. No is a complete sentence. not the beginning of a negotiation. We let people be wrong about us sometimes. We stop outsourcing our decisions to a committee of people who don't have to live with the consequences. And we lose the need to win every argument because making a positive difference starts to matter more than proving we're right. As Brene Brown says, I'm here not to be right. I'm here to get it right. One of the great thinkers of our time, Peter Drucker, once said to Marshall Goldsmith, "We are here on earth to make a positive difference, not to prove how smart or right we are." And that belongs in this conversation because kindness isn't about winning or proving we're right or being morally superior to the nice people or to the direct people or the avoidant people. Kindness asks a better question. What would make a positive difference here? Sometimes making a positive difference means being gentle or being quiet, or listening longer than we had planned. Sometimes it means apologizing or setting the boundary, telling the truth, or ruffling some feathers. Not because we need to be right, because something needs to be healed. Something needs to be clarified or protected. Something needs to be named. That is kindness, not a performance, not approval or people pleasing, but making a positive difference. I'm going to give you some tips on how you can move from nice to kind. Not to say that nice isn't nice, good sometimes, but it's a way of living in fear, living small. This also shows up in leadership. There's a difference between a controlling leader, a nice leader, and a kind leader, Goldilocks. A controlling leader assumes alignment. Everybody's thinking what I'm thinking or else. A nice leader stays vague because clarity might make someone uncomfortable. A kind leader verifies what good looks like before the work begins. A controlling leader takes over. A nice leader stays available so that they quietly do the work for everyone. A kind leader transfers ownership at the pace people are ready for. A controlling leader makes conflict personal. A nice leader retreats and lets bad behavior fester. You've had that boss. They say that the health of your culture is directly proportional to the most toxic behavior you tolerate. A kind leader names the issue early while it's still small. That's the leadership version of kindness having a backbone. Because clarity is your leadership responsibility. Ambiguity is normal. Confusion is often preventable. And a kind leader might not remove all the pressure, but they do remove unnecessary fear. Pressure says this matters. Fear says you're not safe. And when fear is present, people armor up. They filter, scrub, sanitize, code switch. They focus on protecting. They tell leaders what they think the leader wants to hear. And this creates silent, nice people, not honest people, not courageous people, not creative people, just careful people. So the goal isn't to create a workplace where nobody feels pressure. The goal is to create a workplace where pressure doesn't require fear. That is kind leadership. I once had a boss who was kind. And it was the first time I had experienced a real difference between kindness and niceness. She wasn't fake nice, not performative, kind. And the difference was clear. Where a nice boss might avoid the hard conversation because they don't want anyone to feel bad, she would come to me and say, "Susan, I need to talk about something with you because I want to help you get it right." A kind boss has the conversation because they don't want the person to stay stuck. They don't want the person to get in their own way. So this boss, rather than being nice and letting me underperform and calling it compassion, she understood that holding me accountable would ensure that everybody else didn't pay the price. And she didn't do it in a shaming way. She practiced what in the book, The 1 Minute Manager, is called praise publicly, correct privately. A nice boss will say, "Oh, don't worry about it," while quietly losing trust. A kind boss says, "Let's talk about what happened, what needs to change, and how I can support you." This boss could be warm and direct in the same conversation, supportive and challenging. That's a skill, that's maturity, and that is kindness. That doesn't avoid reality. It brings reality into the room without humiliating one. That's what healthy people do. They don't weaponize truth, but they also don't bury it. Now, in faith, there's truth and love. In Ephesians 4:15, I'm going to read it to you. Speaking the truth is love. That's such a simple statement. Not truth without love, that becomes cruelty. Not love without truth, that becomes sentimentality. Truth is love, and that's kindness. And here's another one. This will blow your mind. Proverbs 27:6 says, "Wounds from a friend can be trusted, while an enemy multiplies kisses." Ooh, that's a strong verse, because it reminds us that not every painful word is unkind, and not every pleasant word is loving. Sometimes the person flattering you is not for you. And sometimes the person challenging you is deeply for you. That doesn't mean every harsh comment is holy. Please do not use scripture as a weapon to justify being rude. If you enjoy telling it like it is, but have no concern for how the other person receives it, that's not courage. That's ego. I'm just saying, kindness isn't blunt force trauma. Kindness is truth with care. Here's the money moment for me. Kindness asks, is this true? Is this necessary? Is it mine to say at the right time? Can I say it in a way that preserves dignity? Here's an acronym to help you remember it. And I wish I could tell you who spoke this acronym, because I think it's brilliant. I'd love to attribute it to them. It's the THINK model. My poor husband has to hear this all the time. The THINK model. Before you say something, ask yourself, is it true? T. Is it helpful? H. Is it inspiring? I. Is it necessary? N. And finally, K. Is it kind? If not, why are you saying it? So much excessive niceness is about approval. Will they still like me? Will they think I'm difficult? Will they think I'm selfish? Will they be mad? Will I be rejected? Will I disappoint them? These are human questions. I ask them all the time, but they cannot be the compass for our lives. Because if approval is your compass, you will lose yourself trying to stay acceptable for everyone else. If you've ever felt, I'm not sure that I belong at work, here's a little tip. Don't focus on whether they like you and whether you fit in with them. When you worry that you don't belong at work, that's something going on inside of you. Look inward, because in there lies whatever insecurity you're trying to deal with. The answer to feeling like I'm not sure if I belong is not outside of you. It's inside. And here's a hard truth about compliance. Let's be honest. Some people benefit from you being too nice. Some systems will benefit from you having no boundaries. Some workplaces benefit from your over-functioning. Some relationships benefit from your silence. I've been in that relationship where it's always going great as long as it's about the other person. But the moment you have a need, you become inconvenient. Some people only call you kind when you're convenient. So here's a hard truth. Take a deep breath for this one. If people are only happy with you when you have no needs, that is not peace. That's control. If people only call you kind when you're saying yes, that is not respect. That's access. And if people punish you for telling the truth gently, they may not have loved your kindness. They may have loved your compliance. And that's a hard thing to see, but once you see it, you start to get your life back and you can't unsee it. And you start to notice that every time you have your own need, your own wish, your own boundary, your own birthday, they disappear. So this is where I think of a quote from Robert Herjavec, who's my favorite shark on Shark Tank. I'm a very nice guy, but don't mistake my kindness for weakness. That line fits this conversation perfectly because kindness is not weakness. Kindness is not passivity or permission to be used, dismissed, manipulated, or ignored. Kindness is strength under control. It's warmth with discernment. It's generosity with boundaries. I'm going to say that one again. Kindness is generosity with boundaries. Kindness is compassion with clarity. And sometimes people are surprised when the kind person finally says no, or that doesn't work for me, or I need to be honest, or we need to address this. If you've been on TikTok, Instagram, he's everywhere. Jefferson Fisher, the attorney who teaches you how to argue and communicate, he is the essence of kind versus nice. He taught me the phrase, that doesn't work for me. Not, I hate your idea, not you're stupid, not you don't matter, not I don't care about you. That doesn't work for me. That's not the kind person becoming mean. It's the kind person becoming clear. So yes, be kind, be gracious, be generous, be thoughtful. But don't let anyone mistake your kindness for weakness. And don't mistake it in yourself either. I have a very sad memory of my own life where I was starting to wake up to the difference between nice and kind, realizing that I was abandoning myself every time something became difficult or every time my friend was dismissive of me or made fun of me or just not generally looking out for me. I used to tolerate that and brush it off and say, but there's so much fun in all these other ways. Or, you know, they made me this beautiful gift. And all those things were true, but the paper cuts added up over time. And as I became more aware of my own needs and what doesn't work for me versus what does, I started backing away or speaking up in those moments. Hey, I didn't like what you just said. You don't have to explain it. I didn't like what you just said. That's not an invitation for an argument. It's a simple boundary. And I noticed that as I spoke up more and more and retained the same love for this person, but included love for myself, I was no longer convenient. I was no longer funny. I was no longer fun. Naming what you need should not be a turnoff for a friendship. It's okay if you have incompatible needs, but putting up a boundary against unkindness or cruelty, that's a signal for the health of the relationship. You might have to ruffle some feathers. An example in parenting, a child wants something that's not good for them. Nice wants to avoid the meltdown and just shut him up in the grocery line. That's why the candy bars are at that height. Kind can tolerate the meltdown because the child's growth matters more than the parent's immediate comfort. That is such an easy thing to say. But nice gives in over and over to keep the peace. How many people find themselves in marriages of 20, 30, 50 years where they became so good at keeping the peace that they locked away so deep within themselves they didn't even recognize who they were? Kind holds the boundary to build safety. You see this at work as well when it comes to workload. Someone asks for just one more quick thing. You're so good at PowerPoint. It's never quick. You're already overloaded, but you find yourself saying, sure, I can do that because you're nice. But if you're kind, you say, I can't take that on today. I can help you think through another option. It's the wicked no, W-I-C-D, wicked. No, I can't do that. But what I can do, wicked, W-I-C-D, what I can do. And the last scenario, feedback. When someone you care about is hurting people with their behavior, nice avoids the conversation. Nice says, that's just how they are. Kind says, I care about you too much not to tell you how this is landing. Again, kindness has a backbone. I have a colleague, and he would show his feelings on his sleeve, I guess is the saying. And when he would become frustrated, he would take deep sighs in the meeting, or he would look away and not make eye contact with people. And it was starting to have an impact. And someone made a comment to me, I don't feel safe talking when Joe is in the room. Not because I don't like him, not because he doesn't have brilliant ideas, but because he's always showing how stupid he thinks we are or how frustrated he is with the situation by huffing and puffing and stopping eye contact, literally turning his body away from the table. I did not want to say something to Joe, not his real name, by the way. I didn't want to say something because I knew that he was going through a difficult time, and I knew he didn't want to hear that he was landing on people poorly in yet another circumstance. But here's the thing. He already knew that at some level, but nobody wanted to poke the bear. I certainly didn't want to poke the bear, but I did want to say, hey, you're leaving scratches where you might not want to. So I approached him privately, always correct privately, praise publicly. And I said, I notice in meetings that when you get frustrated, you sigh out loud and you roll your eyes and you kind of turn your chair this way. And as I'm doing this, he starts smiling with that knowing, yeah, I do that. And he said, do I show that out loud? I said, yeah, you definitely do. And he said, am I an A? Fill in the blank. And I said, no. But in those moments, you're alienating not only other people in the room, but my sense is you're shutting down and alienating yourself. I care too much about you not to tell you how this is landing. He has more self-awareness now. He didn't thank me in the moment. It was very embarrassing. He was frustrated. But I know now because he thanked me later and he told me, I trust you because I know you will tell me when I'm getting in my own way. Oh man, that kind of trust is golden. Now, let's bring in some psychology. You know, you got the shrink here. So researchers often use the term pro-social behavior to describe actions that are intended to benefit other people. In plain language, helping people can be good for us. Kindness and generosity matter. We are not meant to become isolated little fortresses of self-protection. We're wired for connection. But here's the distinction. Healthy pro-social behavior benefits others without erasing the self. Fawning benefits others while abandoning the self. You know that feeling. Kindness is chosen. Fawning is driven. Kindness is free. Fawning is fear. Kindness can say yes. Kindness can say no. Fawning only feels safe saying yes. That's the difference. I had a friendship once, and I thought I was being nice because I almost always said yes. And one day we were in a group setting, and my friend asked a question. And my genuine answer to the question, she was asking, hey, do you like this thing about me? And I said, yes. And she said, you're always going to say yes. I can't trust what you're going to say. And she said it jokingly, but she was absolutely telling me that she didn't believe what I had to say because she knew that I was handling her with kid gloves. That's not kind. There's another psychology concept here. It's called the spotlight effect. The spotlight effect is the tendency to overestimate how much other people are noticing us, judging us, or thinking about our mistakes. That's freedom. Because many of us stay too nice because we think everyone is watching. They are not. It's like the second agreement in the book, The Four Agreements. Don't pay attention. Don't worry about what others are thinking about you. They're not. Most people are so busy managing their own lives, their own worries, their own insecurities, their own inboxes, and their own dinner plans, weird text messages. So maybe stop performing quite so hard. But you might be saying, wait a minute, Susan, that's the opposite of another thing I know, which is people will forget what you say. They will forget what you did. But Maya Angelou tells us they will never forget how you made them feel. So that's what you're trying to manage. You're trying to manage making them feel good. But it doesn't work if it's not genuine. Your body knows you're not being real. And at some level, so do others. So you can stop performing quite so hard. Stop believing that every boundary is breaking news. Maybe you could trust that one honest sentence will not destroy every relationship worth keeping. And psychology often reminds us that identity is built by behavior. We don't wait to become the person we want to be. We practice becoming that person. And every action is a vote for the future self we're building. And that's what's happening with me right now. I would say in the past 7 years, I may not always do it. I may not always stand up for myself or speak up or choose kindness over niceness, but I sure recognize it a lot more. I'll never forget when Tom, my husband, said, after I got off a phone call with a particularly unpleasant banking person, and he said, I notice that you are standing for yourself more. That doesn't mean I have to put other people down. It just means I'm not over apologizing. I'm not worried about someone being disappointed so much that I rush to rescue them from that feeling right after I say the hard thing. I'm practicing giving feedback before resentment builds. I owe that not only to the other person, I owe that to myself. I practice saying sentences like, I see this differently, or I care about you and I can't take that on. That's how identity changes, not through one grand declaration, although I would have loved for it to speed up and get there, through repeated small acts of courage. So there's a workplace trend I want to talk to you about. They're calling it micro shifting. Have you heard of this? Micro shifting. Breaking your workday into intentional chunks instead of one long uninterrupted stretch. And whether the exact model works for you in your workplace, whether it's home or office or construction site, I think it points to something bigger. People are trying to find ways to work without abandoning their lives. A healthy marriage requires that too. You've got to find a way to be able to say and have your needs without abandoning yourself so that you become resentful and then you go off and do passive aggressive things to meet your need. Caregivers are trying to stay employed without pretending they don't have caregiving responsibilities, holding their baby off of outside of the screen. They're trying to protect energy, focus, health, and family. And that's where nice versus kind shows up again. A nice employee will pretend everything's fine and silently burn out. A kind employee tells the truth about capacity. A nice leader might say, my door is always open, but then they never change the conditions that make people afraid to walk through that door. And a kind leader instead, they'll get curious about what people actually need to do good work, to stay whole. Nice smiles at burnout. Kind names it and then does something about it. Nice praises resilience while ignoring overload, whereas kind asks what needs to change. So here's a test for you. Are you nice or kind? Are you ready? We're going to make this practical. You can answer in your head, no shame, no scorekeeping, just awareness. For each statement, there's going to be 10. Answer often, sometimes, or rarely. 1, I say yes before checking whether I actually have the time, energy, or desire. You do that often, sometimes, or rarely. Number 2, I avoid honest conversations because I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. I say yes to going to the party so they feel great in the moment, but then I don't go. 3, I feel guilty when I set a boundary, even if the boundary is reasonable. 4, I use phrases like, no worries, it's fine, whatever works for you. When I actually do have worries, it's not fine and it doesn't work for me. Number 5, I worry that people will think I'm selfish if I tell the truth about what I need. It's a big one for me. Number 6, I soften my opinion so much that people don't know where I stand. I'm trying to be for everyone, and I end up being for no one. Number 7, I feel proud of being helpful, but also secretly resent how much people rely on me. That's another one I'm guilty of, people. I'm an Enneagram 2. If you ever took the Enneagram test, I'm a 2-3. I'm a helper. And I pride myself and get joy out of helping, but I'm also getting mad while I'm doing it. That's not fair to you or me. Number 8, I would rather disappoint myself than disappoint someone else. Number 9, I confuse conflict with danger. If that's true, you might be leaning toward nice. And number 10, finally, I'm more committed to being liked than being honest. Now pause. If you answered often to several of those, you're not bad, you're not weak, you're not broken. You may have just learned that being pleasing is safer than being real. And now you're being invited into a more honest kind of love, a love that includes you. Here's the second test, and this one is my favorite. Are you managing the mood or addressing the issue? Here's how you test yourself. You ask yourself, when you're in a situation and you find yourself being pulled, ask, am I managing the mood or am I addressing the issue? Because excessive niceness often manages the mood. Kindness addresses the issue. Nice says, let me keep everyone calm. Kind says, let me help us get honest. Nice says, my door is always open. Kind says, I'm going to create the kind of safety where people can actually walk through that door. Nice says, I don't want to upset them. Kind says, I don't want to abandon them to a pattern that is hurting them and abandoning myself. Nice says, I will treat everyone the same so nobody gets mad. Kind says, I will treat people fairly, which may mean different people need different kinds of support. And then the last one, which is maybe the hardest one, nice says, I heard the feedback. Kind says, I'm willing to act on that feedback, especially the part that stung. Doesn't mean you have to swallow every feedback that comes your way, but you don't also have to get knocked over by it. Self-awareness is being willing to see the gap between who we intend to be and how we are actually experienced. I am done being nice. I'm ready to be kind. People come and go. They take what they want sometimes. They leave a mess, and we smile and we say, no problem, but it is a problem. I want to say I care enough about this relationship to tell the truth about what I can and cannot do. That's not selfish, that's stewardship. So here's some kind phrases to practice. I want to be honest about what I can realistically do. I care about you and I cannot say yes to that. My favorite, I see this differently. I'm not comfortable with that. I need some time before I answer. I want us to talk about what happened. I know this may be hard to hear, but I'm saying it because I care. I can help, but I cannot own this for you. And then the last one, maybe the best one. I value our relationship too much to be dishonest and pretend everything is fine when we need to address it. These are kind sentences. They may not feel nice in the moment, but they're kind because they're honest, respectful, and they keep the relationship connected to reality. That's another thing about niceness. Nice isn't reality. Kindness is. Some of us are so nice that we would apologize to the chair after bumping into it, walking by, and then ask the chair if it needs anything. I used to think being nice meant I was low maintenance. And I realized I was not low maintenance. I was just doing all the maintenance myself. This one lands a little too close, doesn't it? Because the over apology habit is real. The over explaining is real. Emotional labor, constant scanning the room. And it's tiring. So 5 ways to move from nice to kind. 1, pause before you say an automatic yes. You're allowed to say, let me think about that and get back to you. A rushed yes often becomes a resentful yes. Number 2, tell the truth sooner. Delayed honesty often becomes intensified resentment. Kindness names things while they're still small enough to heal and move on. Number 3, let people have their feelings. Someone can be disappointed and you can still be kind. Someone can misunderstand you and you can still be okay. Someone can disagree with your boundary and the boundary can still be right and tight. Number 4, stop using exhaustion to prove love. You're not more loving because you're more depleted. You're not more faithful because you're more overextended. You're not more valuable because you're more available. This is a big one for me in my marriage. I often would overfunction, go to do the thing, and then be mad because I wasn't getting appreciation for it, even though I wasn't asked to do it in the first place. And why do I want to force my spouse to, why do I make it so that Tom has to be grateful for every little thing I do? That's me needing him to be grateful, not doing something because I have love. And 5, last one. This is awesome. 3 words. Practice clean kindness. Clean kindness has no hidden invoice attached. It gives freely or tells the truth freely. It doesn't give while secretly keeping the score. Here's another way to think about this. Before you respond, ask yourself, am I trying to be liked or am I trying to be loving? That one question can change everything. Because being liked is about my image. Being loving is about the good. Being liked might require me to disappear, but being loving requires me to be present. Being liked is fragile, and it depends on the number of thumbs up you get on your Facebook or Instagram post. Being loving is grounded, putting it out there and calling it good. Now, important caveat, not every feather needs ruffling. I don't want you to go out there and declare and confront and ruffle just because you're mad and you're not going to take it anymore. Some things are small and can be released. Some things aren't worth your energy. Maturity is knowing the difference. So we're going to end with a little meditation. Take a deep breath in through your nose. And as you exhale, think, help me to be kind without being cowardly. Help me to be honest without being harsh. Help me be generous without abandoning myself. Help me release the need to be approved by everyone. Help me love with courage and speak truth in love, knowing when to be gentle, when to be quiet, when to be brave, and when to ruffle a few feathers. So here's my invitation for this week. Notice one place where you're being nice, but not kind. That's all. Just notice. I want to thank you for being with me today on Human Being with Dr. Susan. If this episode made you think of someone, share it with them. And if it helped you name something you've been carrying, I'd love for you to comment and let me know how it impacted you. And remember, next Sunday, July 12th, Jeff Cervello and I will welcome Dr. Rachel Goldman to our Imperfect, Better After Broken show. This has been Human Being with Dr. Susan, and I've really enjoyed being with you. And thank you for your kindness.
Yeah.